So, hello friends, I am Dr. G.K. Goswami from India, and you are welcome to our show, Dr. G.K. Goswami IPS. As you know, today our esteemed guest is very renowned professor in California, Professor Justin Brooks. And I believe that in the field of law, particularly dealing with the wrongful conviction, handling the innocence claim, I think he is a globally known figure. And I had occasion to meet Professor Justin in year 2022 when I visited there as Fulbright Fellow for pursuing my study on wrongful conviction and innocence claim, particularly how it can be rolled out in Indian context after looking the experience of US for about more than 3 decades. So we'll talk about that in little more detail with Professor Justin. And let me just introduce him. It's my onerous duty. Currently, Professor Justin is serving as Professor of Practice at University of San Diego and coordinating over 35 innocence organizations in Latin America. And friends, you will be surprised to know that US is the pioneer country. In 1992, Innocence Project first time was introduced by Barry Scheck and his colleague in 1992 in New York City. I will talk about that in a little later stage. But Justin Brooks was the one who in 1999 initiated California Innocence Project, CIP. And he actually was instrumental to free nearly 40 members who were wrongly convicted, and many of them were on death row. I had occasion to see one live case when I was in CIP. I was there for about a week time. And one case, Alexander Torres, that was from Los Angeles. And I had occasion to see the file and many other details I could look into. So it was very fascinating. We will talk about him more. And other instances, because he will tell by himself. Another important case which I would like to flag was Brian Bank case. He was a high school footballer, very energetic guy, having a very bright future. But unfortunately, he was being accused by his own classmate for rape. And somehow he was convicted. But later, with the intervention of Professor Justin and his team, he was found innocent and was released. And a biopic movie named Brian Bank was featured in 2018. And I had occasion to see that movie. It's a very, very fascinating. And the audience, I suggest you that have a look. It's a brilliant feature. Another feature of Professor Justin, although it's countless, but his book, and probably it is the standalone book he has written with all his case studies, what he has undergone in last 30 years, 30 plus years. You may go to prison even if you are innocent. It's a very heart-touching book. And Justin was very kind to send me its draft. And I had occasion to see, and that's why I feel lucky that before the book came to my hand, I had seen that in the draft format also. He has a list of numerous awards. Rather, I say that's award being awarded on his name. And he was designated multiple times Lawyers of the Year. He has been designated as Champion of Justice. He has been declared top 100 lawyers of California. And his list is very big. As I mentioned that I had occasion to meet him in California CIP in 2022. We had a very sumptuous lunch. I still remember Justin, and I had very good memory altogether in last 4-5 years, ever since I was connected you on through email, and then we had a personal relationship. So having said that, let me introduce my dear friends about the topic what we are going to discuss today. So we are going to discuss about wrongful conviction and how innocence claims should be put forth before the court and other judicial process. As I mentioned already that in year 1992, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, they initiated Innocence Project. And I had occasion to not only meet Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, but I was there for about 2 months time. And I have worked there in a very, very intrinsic manner and learned many things. And before I enter into this field, the field is so important and touchy that if you get some time, please look into a very old case of 1660 named Camden Wonder case, where a 70-year-old person was found missing, and the two young boys, they were brothers, Perry brothers of age 12 and 14, along with their mother, they were being hanged for killing the person for the purpose of having some money snatched or something like that. But later, their gentlemen came back. But they lost the 3 lives of young men and all. Many cases I can cite, O.J. Simpson case, very famous case of 1995. Then Central Park 5 jogger case, very famous, where 5 young minor boys, they were being convicted. But later, when a serial rapist named Messias Reyes, he confessed that he was the culprit. Then after a lot of other evidence, they were put forth and all 5 were found innocent. I have already mentioned about Alexander case, but Justin, I want to tell you a very important and recent case happened in our country, India. In 2024, is precisely on 18 March. Anokhilal was a young boy and he was almost illiterate, having very limited resources, a marginalized guy of age 21 in a village, and a girl was found missing in the evening, and ultimately he was being implicated, and just in 14 days the investigation was concluded, and in 13 days only the trial was concluded, and the legal aid support was given at a very later stage. And as you know, normally the quality of legal aid advocates are not up to the mark many times, including India. Cutting a story short, this matter went to High Court in appeal, and our Honorable High Court also confirmed the death penalty. Matter went to the highest authority, the Supreme Court. Somehow, a very renowned advocate, Siddharth Luthra, was designated as amicus curiae, and the matter was referred back for de novo trial. There were some points, I don't want to take much time, but ultimately, in de novo trial also, the same mistakes were committed by the trial court, and second time, he was again awarded that penalty. Matter again went to High Court, and now some well-trained advocates, especially I want to tell the name, Ms. Shreya Rastogi and her team supported the defense lawyer in the High Court, and matter was remanded back again for the third trial. The same high trial court judge was then convinced that Anokhilal was innocent. And you will surprise, unfortunately, the DNA report, which was considered to be the basis of conviction and for death penalty, it was found that it was misinterpreted. So that is a very, very glaring case. And now not only this case, but I think it is the beginning in India also that the innocence claim are being taken in a very serious note, especially in last 2 to 3 years. So that is a very silver line, although it's a very tedious work, tedious job. But this show, which we are conducting today, especially we want to learn from your experience, vast experience for more than 3 decades, that how we can also introduce such type of legal remedy in our country. Friends, before I start some queries before Justin, I would say that the important point which touched me also, I had occasion to meet Brian Stevenson in 2022 when I visited Duke University in Raleigh. His talk was being organized in Duke University. And before that, I had read one book which I suggested you also, Just Mercy. And Just Mercy movie is also there on the same book. But the touchy thing which I want to reflect here is that when he was an intern in year 1983, he was LLM student in Harvard Law School, and he was not very happy with his legal profession. He was reluctant. And as a intern, when he completed first year, he was was attached as intern with a lawyer. And that lawyer actually asked him to go and meet his first client named Henry, who was in death row. And he was told that please go to Atlanta prison to inform him that his execution of his death penalty has been postponed and he is not going to be executed this year, that particular 1983. He was very reluctant, thinking that, oh, what should I do going there? This message could have been sent even by the postal services also. So by very, reluctant manner, he entered there to meet in the jail the client Henry, and he was thinking that it is hardly a matter of 2-3 minutes telling that your execution is delayed. But he spends hours together with him. And when he came back, he was a different Brian Stevenson. So what I mean to say that when you learn the practical things, when you meet such people, those who are the sufferers, then only you get to know. And I think for giving that kind of experience to us, none other than Justin may be the best person globally to enlighten us on this very, very sensitive and humanistic subject. So, Professor Justin, you are most welcome once again. Thank you very much for sparing time. And you are very close and dear friends to all of us. And I want to invite you sometime to this institute. I will talk about institute also. So first of all, I want to congratulate you for your such a vast experience, for your so much of contribution to the system. But I want to know that what inspired you so intensively that you became lawyer. And of course, there are so many lawyers. But what inspired you to take up wrongful conviction as a mission? Because wrongful conviction and these things are generally not very paying field for a lawyer. So what was the catalytic agent for this change? Thank you.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Doctor. It's a pleasure to join you. It's nice to see you. It's been a few years since I've actually seen you, even though we've kept in contact since you visited the United States. And it was a great pleasure to have you here. When you contacted me, it's so important to me that Innocence work is spread around the world. And so I always take the opportunity to talk to anybody from around the world who's interested in doing this work, because that's how it goes. You tell one person, they tell someone, eventually we get things going. My career started in an unusual way. I actually went to law school to become a corporate lawyer. My brother is a very successful business lawyer in Boston. He's got a big, beautiful house and has made a lot of money as a business lawyer. And that's what I'd planned on doing. And then in my first year of law school, my criminal law professor brought us out to a prison. And I remember meeting the guys there and talking to them about their problems. And then I ended up teaching in a correctional facility when I was in law school. And it just changed the whole direction of my career, just seeing so many people locked up. The United States leads the world in having the most people incarcerated. We have the highest incarceration rate as well in the world. We incarcerate a higher percentage of our population than any other country. And getting involved in it firsthand and seeing a lot of the reasons people ended up in prison to do with poverty, to do with education, to do with drugs. I just wanted to be part of that system and try and make it better. Wrongful conviction work came to me actually after I'd been a lawyer for a number of years, and I became a law professor. And I read in the newspaper one day about a 21-year-old woman who was on death row, scheduled to be executed in Illinois. And the article said that she was sentenced to death on a plea bargain. And I thought, how can anyone be sentenced to death on a plea bargain? Because a plea bargain means there was a negotiation with the prosecution and defense to waive the trial. And no one ever does that and then gets the death penalty. It's a plea bargain. You're supposed to get a bargain at the end of it, like maybe life in prison or 20 years in prison, but something. So I went out and met with her on death row, and I found this very young woman who her English wasn't great. She was Latina, and she really didn't understand what had happened to her. And then she says to me, "I'm innocent." I said, "You're innocent and you pled guilty and now you're going to be executed?" And she said, "Yeah." So I went back to the law school where I was teaching first-year criminal law students, and I said, "There's this young woman on death row. She says she's innocent. Who wants to help me out?" And 4 kids raised their hand, 4 law students. And I said, "Come over to my house tonight and we'll start looking through the record." And that night at my kitchen table, the Innocence Project was born for me. We then went out to the crime scene and we started investigating the case, and we just found substantial evidence that she was innocent. And ultimately, I was able to get her death sentence reversed. But one of the tragic things is I got her death sentence reversed, and in that process, I decided this is what I wanted to do with my life. So I quit my professor position in Michigan, and I moved to California, and I started the California Innocence Project. But it took me 27 more years to get her out of prison. I only ultimately got her exonerated 2 years ago. And I started working on that case when I was 29 years old, and I finished it when I was 58. And so there's a lesson in that too, of kind of how difficult this work is and sometimes how long you got to stay with these cases.
Yes, I can understand. And the perseverance which you have expressed in last 30 years for the same case, it's a testimony in itself. And that is the commitment actually for the cause of justice. So I really salute for your commitment, for your dedication to the cause of justice. It's really remarkable, and it's very, very proud to me as well to know that such a person is committed for the society. Although this case itself is a very touchy case, but in your entire career, there may be so many other cases also. So I request you to give some other case also if you feel appropriate, maybe brand case or maybe more, anything, because these live cases actually sensitize people to learn more about such type of menace in the legal system.
Sure. It's always hard to pick your favorite client. It's kind of like picking your favorite child. I've been lucky that I've walked 40 innocent people out of prison. And every one of those cases was tragic, and every one of those cases, their families suffered great harm. My clients suffered great harm. And so it's always hard to say, which is your favorite case or favorite client, but I've certainly had many, many touching moments. I think the women I've represented have been the most powerful cases for me, in that when they're innocent women in prison and what they go through and the psychological damage, it just seems at a much higher level. So my client, Marilyn, obviously walking her out of prison after 27 years working on her case was, mind-blowing for me. But, one client I think about a lot is this client, Guy Miles. And if anyone wants to check out a video of him getting out of prison, I've got a website called youmightgotoprison.com. And if you go on that website, you can see a lot of videos of people I've got out of prison and their different stories. And there's a video there of the night that I brought him home to his parents. And Guy was just one of the nicest people I've ever known. No matter how bad his case was going, he was always so grateful to have the help. And his parents and his whole family would show up at every hearing, dressed up nicely for court, being respectful. And I used to think, if my son was in prison for something he didn't do, I just don't know if I could be as gracious and kind as these people were. And so that night, bringing him home to his family was just amazing. I'd worked on the case for 15 years. He was identified in a really terrible cross-racial identification, which is one of the leading problems we have in the United States. He's a black man. He was identified by 2 white bank employees who said that he robbed this bank in Orange County, and he had never been to Orange County. He'd never even been in the county where the crime happened. And he was in Las Vegas in another state when it happened, and he still got convicted. And I think his story is an important one for people to understand, that we now know that when someone walks into a courtroom and identifies someone and says, I'm 100% sure that's the person who committed this crime, they get convicted without any other evidence.
Very
And
true.
we now know that that's not very strong evidence, that there's so many problems with people's memories and identification processes that they get that wrong often. And so I've walked about a dozen people out of prison who were convicted based on bad identifications. And that's something to consider in India, of how the procedures are done there, because in California, we've changed all our procedures to make them consistent with good science. And things like an officer who's investigating the case can't be in the room when you're having the identification procedure, because if they know who the suspect is, they often give off signals and tells without even knowing they're doing it. And there's a number of other things too. I talk about them in my book, You Might Go to Prison, Even Though You're Innocent. And there's a lot to be learned about this area of law, which is why I'm so grateful that you're involved in it and that you're giving a platform to talk about it.
So thank you very much. And of course, as you rightly mentioned, that people are so innocent really, that despite the system has been treated them very badly across globe, but their response, their family are so courteous that they hardly complain. That's really a touching point. And I have, in my last 3 decades in police, I have seen such stories very closely. So I really appreciate the way your face was expressing that pain, that agony, and apathy of the system, that this kind of heart which you carry actually needed to provide justice to the people. Having said that, briefly, Justice, please tell us that what are the critical factors for wrongful conviction, as you already mentioned about misidentification by the eyewitness. I also have the same feeling that there are so many factors, because when any crime happens, you are not very consistently watching a person. There are so many constraints on ground. And I have occasion to visit thousands of cases of murder, robbery, and many heinous crime. One can easily imagine that if suppose there is a fire, how can a person very consistently or very pertinently can watch that what kind of clothes, what kind of face, what kind of other description of the person can be described the way in the court the questions being asked by the prosecutor or by the defender for that matter. So these are really critical point. Having said that, if you can enlighten in very short way, already you have mentioned one guilty plea. That is also a very, very dangerous fallacy, but it exists, and many country, they are utilizing this legal tool just to, conclude the trial fast. That's unfortunately a very sad commentary. But what are the critical factors, if you can just narrate in brief?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my entire book is based on that concept. In fact, the original title of it was Top 10 Reasons Innocent People Go to Prison. And each
Yeah.
chapter breaks down the different causes. One I've already said is bad identifications. Another one is bad lawyering, which my client Marilyn Malero suffered from because her lawyer didn't know what he was doing and had no experience and then just pled her guilty. Another cause of wrongful convictions is false confessions. We now know that after 12, 13, 14 hours of interrogation, people sometimes just get irritated or broken down and they start confessing the things they didn't do. About 13% of the people who are wrongfully convicted in the United States confess to crimes they didn't commit. And that was without police violence or anything like that. It was just poor procedures, lengthy procedures that led to that. We know that people often lie in the criminal justice system. Sometimes it's what we call snitches who will make things up to get out of their own problem and then other people get convicted based on their testimony. Sometimes it's like my client Brian Banks you referred to, where a 15-year-old girl gets angry at a kid at school and says he raped her, even though that was a false statement. Sometimes we have police who lie in certain situations. I think most police officers go out every day and try to do their job the best they can. But like in every profession, there's always some percentage that are not good at their job or can make things up. I think we've got a lot of issues with forensic sciences that aren't as good as we might think they are. And then we have all the sort of societal problems like racism and bias that sometimes just impacts the whole system. Because in the United States, we have studies that show that when a victim is white, there's a very different approach to a lot of those cases. And one of the leading reasons you get the death penalty in the United States is because the victim was white, not because it was the most heinous, kind of crime. So we have systemic problems, we have human problems, we have scientific problems, and all of them can lead to somebody being in prison for something they didn't do.
Yeah, that's very true. But I want to just little explain about the confession legal system in India. Basically, confession before police in India is not admissible in any circumstances. There were very few acts, the legal documents where confession before police was accepted, but by and large it is not. Only if somebody confesses before police, the police has the duty to produce him before magistrate at the earliest time, and then the magistrate also give him or her some 24-hour time so that there should be no extraneous compulsion or an extraneous pressure for confession. And then all alone, when there is nobody, no police, no prosecution, then only the confession is recorded. And prior to that, the magistrate has to explain him that if you accept or you confess this crime, then it may go to against your interest or you may be convicted. So these are some legal protection in India. Probably police confession in US and many other countries is being granted legally. And I have worked little more on that. Sometime we will talk. And I want to tell you that after that research, I have registered myself. Even before that, when I went there, I had registered for postdoctoral research, and that work has been completed. The dissertation is complete. So I will share you the copy, and a lot of anecdotes what you shared with me have been mentioned over there, and the degree will be awarded very soon. So I will come sometime with Swiss to you, or we will invite
Congratulations. You. That's very interesting. I'm writing a book right now with my son, who's also a criminal lawyer, about procedural stuff. And one of the chapters I'm writing about is looking around the world for better procedures. You know, it doesn't make sense that countries operate in isolation on these kinds of issues. We can learn so much from each other. And sometimes you start doing something one way 200 years ago and you don't ever change it. And I find that in the criminal justice system, and it's frustrating that, you know, it's kind of, as soon as in the United States we start doing something one way, we don't look around for other ideas. We just kind of keep doing it pretty much the same way.
I will tell you a very interesting story that the Britishers actually, construed our law when India was under their control politically. And in year 1898, the first draft, or rather the CRPC, was enacted in India as old as 1898. Its section 164 clearly mentioned that confession will be recorded only by the magistrate. But if you see their own CRPC in England, they have not done the same. So it's quite interesting that they have done the double standards. I'm not criticizing or anything, just my observation as an academician, that they have two ways. In India, I think they have introduced the better one. That's how I look at it. I am a police officer. I have respect for my profession, but certainly police is a party, though in the criminal justice system, particularly when adversarial system, the judge is considered neutral and everybody is to support the judge. But police becomes party, the prosecution becomes party. So somehow or other, they actually support the prosecution case. So thank you very much.
And that's the best way to do it. I mean, we have to get together on this. And that's why I work with prosecutors on old cases. And it shouldn't be that defense attorneys are going on TV and pointing at the police and pointing at prosecutors and blaming them. That doesn't help the victims. What's better is if everybody works on these issues together and fixes these wrongs. And that's, and we're moving more towards that in the United States, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah, that's very right. So now let me come down to the countries which are looking for initiating innocence type of organizations and all. So what kind of challenge do you find, or you suggest that how to address those challenges? Because one thing which I learned in my studies in US and other countries as well, that new evidence has to be find out when you actually go for assailing the conviction, particularly when all appeals have been exhausted. So please enlighten us that what kind of challenges are there for beginning and how to overcome them.
Well, there's 4 legal claims you can make in the United States to get an innocent person out of prison. The first one is that you have new evidence that's really compelling that proves their innocence. The second is you can prove definitively that false evidence was introduced in court against them, which violates their constitutional rights. The third way is you can prove that their lawyer was completely incompetent and didn't present the evidence in court that needed to be presented that could have shown them to be innocent. And the final way is what we call a Brady violation, which is the police withheld information that could have proved you were innocent. So those are the legal claims, but they all still come down to, can you get a judge to believe this person's innocent? And can you bring the kind of evidence in that is compelling with that? So it's not that many cases that ever make it over those hurdles. And even though we've released now thousands of people in the United States, and you can go to, anybody listening can go to the Registry of Exonerations, which documents every single exoneration in the United States. And we now have thousands of them listed there from all the work of all the projects around the United States. But it's still a small fraction of the innocent people who are in prison, because it's hard to tell someone who spent 20 years in prison that they're lucky. But the reality is they are lucky, because it means the evidence still existed that could prove they were innocent. They got a lawyer to work on their case. That lawyer had resources to investigate it. They got a judge to grant a hearing, and the judge had the political will to reverse a conviction, which I don't know how you become a judge in India, but in the United States, a lot of our judges are elected, and so they're very political positions. And so judges don't want to necessarily be in the front page of the newspaper walking someone out of prison who was convicted of murder. So a lot of times, in fact, I always say, I love the old judges. Like, give me a judge who's 80 years old and ready to retire, because those are the ones that don't care, and they will do the right thing because they're not worried about their political future and what their career is going to end up with. So it is an incredible challenge. You have to get really great evidence, and you have to have a lot of luck and good lawyering. And that's why this work isn't for everybody. And sometimes it takes, as I've said, decades to win these cases.
Yeah, you rightly mentioned that US and maybe more countries, they have the tradition or the system of electing judges despite they may not be having any legal education or legal experience. So this is a very unique feature in US. First, when I heard about that, it was quite surprising for me. Not only even the prosecutors also. So they are get elected actually. So that election system is there. We do not have in India. We have the system of through examination. There are written examination for our lower judiciary, and they, after some experience, they get elevated to higher judiciary, say high court. But there is another channel from bar also, that experienced lawyers after a certain age and qualification, means that experience and their other yardstick, if they fulfill, then they get elevated to the bench. And this is the very, you can say, robust system, although the chances of improvement are always there, but we have this system.
That's similar to our federal system. So in our federal system, you get appointed and typically work their way up and maybe someday become a Supreme Court justice. Those are, the president appoints them, the Congress agrees that they become judges. But our state system is where 90-some% of criminal law is practiced. It's not in the federal courts. The federal courts mostly deal with either immigration issues or issues that involve multi-states or drug trafficking across the border, things like that. But most of the typical criminal cases are adjudicated in state courts. And in state courts, we have judges who get elected. Not every jurisdiction, but in a lot of jurisdictions, they're elected officials, and that makes it political, and you can't deny that has some impact on how decisions are made.
Yeah, very true. So another important point which is related to forensic science, in general, a common man feel that science never tell a lie. In general, this is a feeling, and forensic science, normally what we gather as a common man from various shows on television, the movies and all. So they take it as a gospel truth. But as we know that science may be right, but the procedures behind, because the human beings are involved, so there are chances that the procedures may be faulty, and here is the catch point. And even sometimes the science, and a very good friend of mine, probably you may be knowing Professor Justin, Chris Fabricant, who has a very fascinating book, Junk Science. And fortunately, that time when it was released, I was there with Innocence Project NYC, and Chris gifted that book to me. So the problem with forensic science are enormous, and US in the early of this century, this 21st century, lot of issues and challenges were identified. Houston lab, forensic lab, was closed for about multiple years. There were instances in Massachusetts, and so many junk science, so many forensic frauds were identified. Right. So can you suggest, because why I am asking this question particularly, Justin, to you with your experience, that we have initiated a very ambitious project where I am the founding director. This is an institute named Uttar Pradesh State Institute of Forensic Science, where we have merged forensic science with law. And we have given a new concept called law with labs, whereby we are providing legal knowledge to the science and technologist students, like for BTech, the forensic science experts. So they should know how the legal compliances are important. So basic precept of law are being taught here. On the other side, the technocrats, they are giving experience, and law students are being given hands-on training in the forensic laboratory, in our cyber labs and all. So that it should be a kind of proper understanding how the reports, the forensic expert opinion is being built up. Because what happens generally as a common man or as a common legal practitioner, what we generally read the conclusion, whether DNA match, conclusive, inconclusive, or whatever. So despite knowing the underlying data, we do not know how to read it, how to analyze it as a legal expert. So this gap is actually creating more trouble, and many times forensic experts overboast the technology. They say that it is 100% correct. So there is no system of 100% correct in any statistical analysis, and all forensic science are statistical based. So your experience is vast. So I want your comment on this, the probity of forensic science itself.
Sure. It's great what you're saying. I agree with all of it. To start with, DNA is the gold standard of science. However, DNA is only as good as the people who collect it, the people who test it in the lab, the people who read the results. And then, as you said, it's still a statistical probability. The word match cannot really be used anymore because it's a statistical probability. Now, DNA, if it's gathered correctly, tested correctly, results are done correctly, it is the gold standard of forensic science, because we get into probabilities in the 1 in a millions, the 1 in billions, that it's wrong. And an exclusion by DNA is 100% certainty, because you can look at something and say, that's not that person's DNA. If it's what you'd say a match was, it's a probability that it most likely is that person's DNA. But everything down from DNA, the science itself isn't as good. So fingerprinting has been brought to very high levels now, where they can do 3-dimensional fingerprinting. They can do things they could never do before by using computers. But it still doesn't match that level of certainty, because there's still human beings involved in the process of ultimately making the determination. And those are two of the best forensic sciences. We then have what our friend Chris Fabricant would call junk science, things like arson science, where a lot of times it's these, firemen who are testifying about how fires started, but they make all kinds of mistakes. And one of the junkiest science of all, and I've dealt with multiple cases on it, is forensic odontology.
Yes.
And that's matching bite marks. And it's just junk science. You have somebody look at a mark. It's not even really a mark. And people think of it like fingerprinting. It's bruising that occurred after trauma. And they're very vague. And most of them look the same. And most of these experts are just bored dentists with too much time on their hands who love CSI. They're not forensic experts. They're dentists. And they do a little side business of coming in and testifying in criminal cases. And that's why we have to be highly skeptical about forensic science. But when we understand it, it's critical in terms of convicting people, and it's critical in terms of exonerating people. As long as it's good science and we understand the limits of it, and it's just a piece of a case, not the whole case. And that's the message around forensic science from me.
So before we conclude, Professor Justin, I know your time is very precious. At the end, I just want to know a kind of message for new generation, particularly the professionals involved in justice administration. So what is your message to them so that they can commit like you to the cause of justice. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I'm a full-time law professor at University of San Diego. I've actually been working the past couple of years creating online LLM programs. So I'm now in charge of an online LLM program for foreign lawyers, and students sign up for it, and they actually can come to the United States and take the California bar if they're a foreign lawyer and they pass our program. I have a student from India in my class currently who takes my class at 4 a.m. in India because he's very dedicated to wanting to do this work, to come to the United States, to become a lawyer. And I just get so inspired by students and their mission in life. So for me, the most important thing is, first of all, in general, just to find what you're passionate about. Because if you're not passionate about your work, and I know you are, and I know you know I am, then life is very long and boring. You want to be able to get up every day and be, this is what I want to do with my life, and it not feel like a job you had when you were a teenager working at a fast food restaurant, looking at the clock and can't wait to get home. So I say this to all my students, find your passion and follow it. And I've been thrilled with my career. I've been able to, bring 40 people home to their families. I've been able to teach thousands of students about law. I've been able to travel around the world and help people start these innocence organizations that hopefully when I'm gone, they'll continue to help people in their lives. But anyone who wants to come join us can check us out at University of San Diego and our online LLM programs. And I would love to build more and more of an international community.
Thank you very much, Professor Justin, for your enlightening remarks. A lot of issues you have pondered today with your vast experience. So once again, I place my my words of thanks to you. You have given so much time, so much enlightenment to us. Thank you very much. Namaskar. So friends, you were with us, and we must congratulate Professor Justin once again, and we must thank him for his valuable time spared and shared with us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Good night from California.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye.